Belly fat is the last place. Most women lose fat, and the first place it comes back. You can do every core exercise that exists. You can eat carefully for months. You can watch fat disappear from your face, your arms, places you were not even trying to change. And that layer around your midsection sits there completely unbothered. This is not your body being difficult. It is your body following a specific biological order that nobody in the fitness industry ever properly explained to you. The first thing to understand is that spot reduction does not exist. You cannot choose where your body loses fat from by targeting that area with exercise. Doing hundreds of crunches does not burn the fat sitting above your abdominal muscles any more than chewing aggressively would slim your jaw. The muscles underneath fat can be trained and strengthened, but the fat on top of them responds to your overall energy balance, not to which muscles you are contracting nearby. This sounds simple, but the fitness industry has built an enormous amount of product revenue on the idea that it works differently, which is why waist trainers and ab machines and targeted fat-burning workout programs exist and continue to sell, despite producing none of the outcomes they advertise. Your body decides where it loses fat based on a combination of genetics, hormones, and the type of fat being stored in different locations, and it follows that order regardless of what you would prefer. For most women, fat loss follows a pattern that starts in the upper body, face, arms, and chest, and finishes in the lower abdomen, hips, and thighs. The midsection is one of the last places to visibly change, which means weeks or months of genuine progress can be happening in your body composition without it being visible in the specific area you are paying the most attention to. Most women quit during this period, concluding that nothing is working, when in reality their body is making progress in the exact sequence it was always going to follow, and the midsection results are still ahead of where they currently are. Estrogen is significantly responsible for this pattern, and it operates differently in women than in anything the standard fat loss advice accounts for. Estrogen promotes fat storage in the lower body and midsection as part of the female hormonal design, and as estrogen levels fluctuate across your cycle and decline with age, the fat storage pattern changes in ways that feel confusing if you do not know what is driving them. In your 20s, estrogen tends to direct fat toward the hips and thighs. As you move through your 30s and estrogen begins declining, fat distribution shifts increasingly toward the midsection. This is why women who maintained a relatively flat stomach through their 20s without much effort start noticing central fat accumulation in their 30s despite no obvious change in their habits. The habits did not change. The hormonal environment directing where fat gets stored did. Cortisol has a direct and specific relationship with abdominal fat that goes beyond general fat gain and that most fitness content glosses over entirely. Your body stores fat in the midsection, preferentially when cortisol is chronically elevated, because abdominal fat is metabolically accessible and physically close to the liver, making it a rapidly usable fuel source during perceived stress. The problem is that your body's stress response cannot distinguish between the kind of stress that would have required immediate physical action for your ancestors and the chronic low-grade stress of modern life. Poor sleep elevates cortisol, undereating elevates cortisol, over-exercising elevates cortisol. Work pressure, relationship stress, financial anxiety, the general relentlessness of having a demanding life all elevate cortisol. And every hour your cortisol stays elevated, your body is receiving a signal to store fat around your midsection and protect those stores against the threat it believes you're facing. This is why women who are doing everything that should theoretically work, eating carefully, training consistently, staying active, and still cannot shift their belly fat, are often dealing with a cortisol situation that no amount of additional dietary restriction or additional cardio will solve. Both of those interventions actually make cortisol worse. Eating less raises it, doing more cardio raises it, the response. Most women have to stall belly fat is to restrict harder and exercise more, which directly worsens the hormonal environment driving the fat storage in the first place. The belly fat stays. The effort increases. The cortisol increases. The fat stays even harder. And the woman concludes her body is uniquely broken rather than that the approach is creating the problem it was supposed to solve. Insulin plays a role that is worth understanding clearly. When you eat, your body releases insulin to manage blood sugar, and insulin is a fat storage hormone. Elevated insulin levels signal your body to store fat rather than release it. Chronically elevated insulin, which results from diets high in refined carbohydrates and sugar eaten frequently throughout the day, keeps your body in a fat storage state for more hours of the day than it spends in a fat release state. This does not mean carbohydrates are evil or need to be eliminated. It means the composition and timing of what you eat affects how much time your body spends in conditions that favor fat release versus fat storage. Women with significant belly fat who eat frequently, snack constantly, and consume a high proportion of processed carbohydrates are often in a state of chronically elevated insulin that makes abdominal fat release physiologically difficult, regardless of their total calorie intake. Sleep deprivation has a relationship with belly fat specifically that goes beyond general weight gain. Poor sleep elevates cortisol, disrupts insulin sensitivity, increases hunger hormones, and specifically promotes central fat accumulation through a combination of those mechanisms operating simultaneously. Studies consistently show that people sleeping less than 7 hours accumulate more abdominal fat over time than people sleeping adequately, independent of their diet and exercise habits. For women whose lifestyle makes sufficient sleep difficult, this is a genuine physiological obstacle to belly fat reduction that cannot be compensated for by eating less or training more. The solution is the thing that feels hardest to prioritize, which is why it is the piece most women skip, and why their belly fat stays in place despite everything else they are doing correctly. Visceral fat. The fat stored deeper in the abdominal cavity around your organs behaves differently from the subcutaneous fat that sits just under your skin. Visceral fat is more metabolically active and more responsive to lifestyle interventions than subcutaneous fat is, which is actually good news because it means the deep abdominal fat that carries the most health risk tends to respond relatively well to the right approach. The subcutaneous fat on top, the layer you can pinch, is more stubborn and more governed by genetics and hormones. Reducing it requires the same things that reduce fat anywhere else in the body: a sustained calorie deficit over time, adequate protein to preserve muscle, resistance training to keep metabolism elevated, and the management of the hormonal environment through sleep and stress that determines how readily your body releases stored fat in that area. The honest timeline for visible belly fat reduction in women is longer than almost anyone is willing to say out loud. If you're doing everything right, and doing everything right means resistance training progressively, eating enough protein, sleeping adequately, managing stress, and eating in a moderate calorie deficit consistently, visible changes in the midsection area typically take longer to appear than changes anywhere else on your body. The fat loss is happening, the scale may be moving, your arms and face may be visibly leaner, but the belly holds on longer because it is hormonally and genetically protected by your body as a priority fat store. The women who eventually lose the belly fat are not the ones who found the right ab workout or the right detox protocol. They are the ones who stayed consistent with the right overall approach long enough for their body to finally work through its priority order and start releasing fat from the area it was protecting last. There is no shortcut here, and there is no targeted solution. The belly fat responds to the same inputs as fat everywhere else, just more slowly and more stubbornly because of where it sits in your body's priority order. Getting there requires the right approach, realistic expectations about the timeline, and enough understanding of what is actually driving the problem to stop making it worse with the interventions that feel productive but are not.